Hello.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you're joining from. Welcome to the second panel in the Adventures Live 2021 Festival, which is on sex and spirit. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second, but first a quick introduction. My name is Paula. I'm a member of the organizing team of Adventures based in Kigali. Really happy to be working with this group for the second year to put together what promises to be a really incredible festival full of thought-provoking conversations, incredible performances, and just all kinds of, really, I think, empowering discussions around power, sex, and magic. That is the theme of this year's festival. I'm going to introduce the guests in a moment. I think you can already see Koi on the screen. We have another guest who was just having some technical difficulties, so he's joining the room again. And once he comes in, then we will do the introduction. So in the meantime, I think I'll use this opportunity to just speak a bit about the festival theme this year and give a bit more context to the conversation that we'll be having today. Hopefully some of you will have had an opportunity to watch the opening discussion in which we spoke more about the theme behind this year's festival, and around the idea of sex and spirituality. So this year we're looking at the way that sex intersects with power, intersects with spirituality, and we felt that this aspect of spirit was really important to bring in. It features in everything, even the festival art. Michael spoke really with a lot of detail and clarity in that opening discussion about how various deities in African spirituality featured in the design of the art. I won't try to paraphrase it because I don't know if I could do justice to it. But also in terms of the conversations that we're having, we're really interested, and that's what we'll be doing today, in diving deeper into that link between sex and spirit. And, if we understand sex, of course, as an energetic exchange between two people, as a creative force that brings forth life, then just within that understanding, I think we can already begin to get a sense of the different spiritual dimensions that are attached to sex, to sexuality. And what we want to understand is, if we approach it from that lens, what does that mean? How does it help us to harness the positive power that comes, with sex, with embracing our sexuality, but also to heal from some of the negative aspects that have been attached to that simply by effects of the world that we live in. And I think when you talk about sex and spirituality, the irony is that often a lot of our instinctive reactions to sex, when you think about spirituality, do tend to be negative simply because of the way that religion, and here I'm specifically speaking about Christianity, which is what I'm most familiar with, has conditioned us to think about sex, which is often to do with attachments of shame, to do with repression, especially when you think about queerness and the persecution that's taking place across the world, and especially in the African continent. Currently, this year we had hoped to have the physical festival in Ghana, but we're not able to because of the oppression that's been taking place around the LGBT community, and laws that are being introduced to prevent people from living freely in their sexuality. And this is often something that is attached to religious beliefs, or supposed religious beliefs. And the irony is, when you think about the history of the African continent, I think both queerness as well as spirituality, and hello, Cuckoo's with us now. Both queerness and spirituality are things that have really been suppressed a lot and erased in our recent history. And so part of what we want to do today as well is to dive into that from the understandings of spirituality as Africans that predate the current Christian beliefs, look into what we believe more deeply as a people, and the way that queerness as well fits into our history, and how we can understand that through the lens of spirit. So we have a bunch of very interesting discussions that we're going to try and cram into the short 1 hour that we have together. But before we dive in, I'm very happy that we have our guests with us now, both of them. We have Koi, who is in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for joining us, Koi. We also have Cuckoo, from Namibia. Cuckoo, it's really great to have you with us. I hope that your connection is okay now. Can you hear us fine? Okay, while we wait for the connection to stabilize, I'm going to ask Koi to say a few words of introduction and explain the work that she does as a spiritual practitioner, and then we'll move on to Cuckoo.
Hello, Paula, hello everyone. My name is Koi Akariza, and I'm from Nairobi, as Paula said. I'm Kenyan via Rwanda, and I work as a spiritual coach. That's to say, I look at healing and emotional well-being from a psycho-spiritual perspective. My primary training came from European and Asian philosophies around, from yoga all the way to breathwork and psychology as it stands. But the more I go into myself and the more I go into my practice, the deeper it has taken me into what is traditionally mine, looking at what were our approaches to dealing with our health as an individual and then extending into our community, And so the interconnectedness of all things is very crucial to what I do in terms of no problem, no challenge is ever just an isolated issue. When you're tending to someone who is unwell, sad, etc., you pause and you hold space for them, but then you extend your awareness into the ecosystem around that person because we are deeply, deeply interlinked, And for the past few years, my practice has primarily been open to those who move with the feminine energy. I don't want to say limited to women per se, but those who move with a female energy, because that is what I've been guided to do. This year has been the first year opening up to working with men again. And I think once I had found the compassion to do so, I have expanded myself to it. So yeah, I am really looking forward to this discussion on sex and spirituality and what it means to be in yourself and in your experiences all the way and into your intimate moments too. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Koi. Cuckoo, can you hear us? I think we see you moving now. The connection seems to be a bit better.
The microphone is off though, Cuckoo.
Yeah. Put on the mic. We're seeing Cuckoo's smiling face, but we can't hear him. Please switch on your mic. I'm trying to message him on the side.
Okay.
Okay. While we wait for Cuckoo to have the mic on and join us, I think we'll ask you, Koi, to just start. Oh, here we go.
Oh.
Hello, Cuckoo.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Perfect.
Okay, so
I got the introduction from Koi.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself too.
All right. So I'm Cuckoo. I'm a Namibian healer. I don't like being referred to as a traditional healer. I'm just a healer in general. But more specifically dealing with issues related to spirituality, and also related to issues of people who might be going through a spiritual calling or having to honor a specific ancestral calling. I basically work in Namibia. I initiated both in Namibia and in South Africa as well. I completed in South Africa. And I've been doing this healing work for 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. And so part of what I'm very excited about in this chat is to kind of get to the bottom of this topic. I'm very passionate about. I'm very sex positive in the way that I present my thoughts and my ideas. A lot of people know that on social media, but also in my own personal life, I'm very much a person who is queer and also someone who very much understands how being spiritual can merge with, or how you can experience sexuality and sensuality from a place of spirit, because of the work that I do with couples, and also people who might be struggling with issues related to their sexuality and that kind of stuff. So that's who I am.
Tagaza, thank you for joining us. I'm going to
So,
ask the first question to you, actually. As you mentioned, you are very sex positive, and I know this. I first encountered you via Twitter, and I think people have a certain idea of how a spiritual practitioner should conduct themselves and what they should speak about. And I love your TL. As I've told you, I think you should really charge tickets. It's so entertaining in many ways. And one of the things that is really interesting is how much and how openly you speak about sex, whether it's your sex life or things that you're observing. And you're very open in terms of sharing that. There was that song you posted once about the penis, which I really wish I'd saved because it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard. And I know that people sometimes react to that and they're like, you're a healer, but it seems that all you do is talk about sex all day. What's that about? So my question to you is, how do you approach that? What's your understanding in the context of your practice and your life of that link? You've spoken about it a bit in your introduction, but if you can go a bit deeper into that, how you understand the role and the place of sex within the work that you do and the connection between that and spirituality.
So, I mean, a lot of what I deal with has to do with couples, specifically couples that are undergoing challenges related to the bedroom. We usually talk about the bedroom in the sense, almost as if like it's a private thing, when in actual fact, the strongest connections that we make with each other as human beings, and it's more specifically within relationships, begin off in the bedroom. And so part of what I do is facilitating healing, people who've experienced trauma, having been someone who survived a lot myself. So I kind of learn how people are, what they enjoy, and what how they wish to express themselves, because a person can have an idea of who they are, but also when they're with someone else, their partner perceives them as something other. So what I try to do is to merge what they want, what they think about, what is in their fantasies, and merge it together with what is presenting itself in the reality. So if a person, for example, feels that they are very much sex positive, that they are very much experimental, for example, but in actual fact, they might not be having the courage to express themselves. So my thing is to take that shame, and it's not necessarily a responsibility of mine, but rather the back there in some kind of way. So what I deal with basically is bringing people together and then finding out what they enjoy and how best to complement that thing that they feel they enjoy, how to bring in that spiritual connection, explaining to them who they are in spirit, what their role is in spirit, and to try and see if there is any kind of, even using their own ancestors or using a reading to kind of uplift them if they've gone through any kind of like sexual abuse or trauma or anything of that nature. So I kind of look into a person's spirit to see what their ancestors have to say, to see the kind of the threshold of their trauma and how it seeps into their current life, and what we can do to return back their power if they've lost any of that, and what the person can also do to kind of affirm themselves and remove themselves from the idea of shame, so that they can experience a better, fulfilling relationship with their partner, where it's intimate, where there is no shame in the kind of trauma.
And I think that point you raise about shame is really, it's kind of central as well to this connection with sex and spirit. Just before we went live, Koy and I were chatting a bit about this and how even the idea of bringing spirit into our sex life sometimes, because of how we were conditioned with Christianity and so on, can feel almost blasphemous. And so, Koy, I'm going to ask you if you can speak a bit more about that and how, in your understanding and your practice, spirit comes into sex, into sexual relationships, and can help us to transcend the shame that our societies often ingrain in us from a young age.
Yeah, because it truly, it is a powerful thing, the way we feel, you know, like having a spiritual practice as an individual, be it whatever religion you stand in, but learning to hold space for your relationship with the I am, however you want, and getting used to that is important through meditation, exercise, yoga, whatever it is that brings you grounded into your being. It often then makes it easier to feel that connection while you're being intimate, you know? And it brings the love back into sex. And often when we say love and sex, it now gets like romantic and heart-shaped. It's like, no, even a connection that you know is not going to last forever can still be loving and respectful and grounded, you know, in some way. And learning how to remove shame from our spiritual life, I think it comes from doing it on a regular basis. You know, it's not a mantra that you can sort of force into yourself, you know, like, I am free, I am connected. You can, you know, to just psych yourself up in the morning. But it's about holding space for the things that you were feeling ashamed about, you know, how Cuckoo was saying of your traumas, you know, the things that hurt in the past, hold space for them separately, without your partner, with you and your maker, and find a way to shift through that. So now when you're in the moment, sex can be delicious because there is joy. Divinity is joy. Sex, like Cuckoo also mentioned, of sex is a form of creation. It's like, if you know, back to being that thing of, I think a lot of religions talk about how we are made in God's image, you know, and in that you are able to create. We are creators ourselves, and one way that we can clearly do that is through humpity bumpity. Yeah. So why are we, when we're intimate, when we're having sex, can we allow ourselves to let ourselves be guided? And that way, when we do that, we're able to move also with a clearer sense of discernment. You know, the things, you will honor yourself clearer. So you're less likely to end up in situations where you feel vulnerable, violated, etc. As you listen to yourself, you listen to that light, how it moves through you, it takes you to a healthier place, you know? And so you have healthier connections, no matter how long those connections are. And you have, like, as I mentioned earlier, I think it makes it easier to climax, to orgasm, you know, because you are free. You are fully celebrating the activity that you're in, instead of being like, oh, we're going to get caught any minute. This is bad. What we're doing, move quickly, you know. Let us enjoy, let it be yummy, yeah? So yeah, the bringing spirituality into our sexuality, I think it's a day-to-day surrender. We slowly start to trust the I am that made us, and that we are not mistakes. So whatever form your sexuality takes, you know, if you identify as queer or whatever it might be, if you make peace with yourself, then you're honoring yourself, and you can set the tone for your lover, you know, in terms of the energy that you would like to receive back.
Thanks for that, Koy. I think it's really helpful for us to understand sex itself as a spiritual activity, not just something that can intersect with spirit, but something that is in itself, has the capacity to be an act of worship. I want to ask you guys thoughts on something that I've read about, you know, on Twitter or whatever, about
in the street,
the way, about the energetic exchange that happens during sex. So what you've both just described about that act of coming in touch with yourself, in touch with spirit, and bringing that wholeness as you enter relationships. And I think it's something that we're not taught enough young, and it's very easy when you talk about sex positivity, it's easy to just think of that more as the physical act, than all the other emotional and spiritual preparation that also needs to go into that. And so I guess my question is, from the perspective of spirituality or African spirituality, what are the kind of risks or benefits that can come from that energetic exchange with someone? If, let's say me as myself, I've done the work. But if I'm going out into these streets, and guys, we know about these streets, huh? There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. What are the sort of things that one should keep in mind when thinking about the way that sex opens you up to that energetic influence with others who you may or may not know that well, may not have the intentions? What are ways that we can protect ourselves from others, or the way that we can work with our partner's energy? And here, not necessarily someone who you're in a long-term relationship with, but maybe someone you just met at the party and you're going home tonight. What are the kinds of things that we can think about in those encounters in order to approach them with that consciousness that you just described? So, Cuckoo, I'm going to bounce back to you for that. And then you, Koi.
Right. I mean, with a lot of the times what people don't, I'm not going to speak from a religious background because, I find that if you bring religion into it, it kind of it divides opinion rather than bringing them together, but how I kind of deal with these things, even on a consultative basis with clients, is that the first relationship that you're going to have is with yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you even have a relationship with your parents, before you have a relationship with your friends or a lover, your first relationship will start with yourself. And so what I usually tell people that they have to create a home themselves. You're not within your own home, you are going to feel that are coming or brewing inside you. You do not know how to make sense out of it. I usually find that even with anxiety, with any of those things that brew inside of us, we don't quite understand, come from the place of either not being okay with yourself. There's something inside that you're battling with. And so when you are at peace with yourself, when you've created the home inside you, when you're alone with your thoughts and your thoughts are pure, your intentions pure, and you provide yourself with the love that you need, then once you encounter someone, whether it's at a club or whether it's just through the streets as we know them, what you want to ask yourself is, do I want to invite that person into my home? Okay. So once you know who you're inviting into, because you know yourself much better, you are the keeper of your home. You give the key to the people who are going to come into your life. And it goes insofar as your sexual experiences too. So if you do not know a person that well, if you cannot even, part of even having sex with someone is to get to know them the way that I see it. Yes, it's a form of pleasure. You get to, enjoy yourself throughout, or maybe not even enjoy yourself. But if you're going to invite someone into your home in that kind of way, you want to make sure that that person is coming to you or entering your home with the same kind of love that you wish to give them. So it has to be reciprocated in a very respectful manner. That person has to behave in your home and has to provide you with what you need in your home. You see what I mean? So, so I feel the ways of engaging people, a lot of people look at sex as if it's something that is dirty. It isn't dirty. It's the person that you engage with that might not have good intentions, but that might not have something to give you that comes from a love. Because if you're going to have sex from a place of love and from a place where you feel like you are empowered, you will feel that. You will feel that in your orgasm. You will feel that in the way that you think about this person while you're with them. And again, if you feel that you're not safe with that person, that should already tell you what the end goal of that sexual experience is going to be. If you fear the person, if you are anxious around the person, how does a person make you feel before you even entertain them beyond the gates of your home? not just the physical space, but also in your heart. How do they feel when you're on them? Because that informs what the sexual experience is going to be like. If he touches you, do you shiver? You know, and also, is it something that comes from your past because you've gone through some trauma, or is it something that the person is bringing with? Because sometimes it's not also you; it could be the next person as well, having gone through certain things that they've picked up throughout life. And so, of even these traumas that we go through, they manifest in a spiritual way as well, in the sense that the person then starts to behave either strangely, starts to develop certain thoughts that might not necessarily be to their own, how do I put it, to their own, like thoughts that might get a person feeling a certain way. So my first is, so engage with someone first before you engage with them in your neither regions. Okay, so if the chest feels that the person is right for you, below it should align already. You see, and so that's how I treat situations. But also, I feel that the bigger benefit experiencing sex is to get to know someone. So you get to know them on an intellectual level. You get to know them from a place, and this place is a place, the heart place is a place where you can tell whether this person is wounded, and even if they want to engage you sexually, whether they're engaging from that wounded place, or whether this person actually has something to offer you. Because if it's right here, then below it will just align, like I said. So once you get to that level of wanting to be intimate with a person, there's an energetic information, an exchange of information. You do not, you kind of feel. And I feel, or let me put it this way, that it's only after after I'd gone through training, that when I now experience sex, for example, it's not like there are things that happen, it's things that you feel. There's a sense of knowing about that person's life, traumas, through that experience. And you also get of who they are, where they come from, what their hopes are, what their ambitions are like, what their fears about. As a healer, as someone who is psychic and someone who deals with that kind of energy, when I engage someone sexually, that's the first thing that I will pick up. And it doesn't have to reach sex for me to pick it up, but I feel sex is also just another oh, sorry. So someone's saying that my video is breaking. Can you guys see me?
No, it's
Can you
okay.
hear me?
It's better now. Yeah, at one
it's
point it
fine now.
did. So carry on. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
connected
okay,
slow
cool.
and
All right.
clearly. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, so that's how it goes. You pick up things. I feel that the psychic language, even in sex, is not. It's like psychic language is kind of like any other language that you have to learn, right? But I feel even people who might not necessarily be empowered with psychic energy, or working from a psychic place, they still get to experience that. But I feel like it's ramifications. They get to experience after the act what their life has become as a result of engaging that person sexually. So, and there are ways to protect yourself energetically from people who might be carrying certain spirits. But I feel like we'll go into that a bit later on. Let me not preempt the entire, or take over the entire, you know.
But yeah.
No, we'll definitely come back to that. But also, let me also give Koi a chance to weigh in on your thoughts on these exchanges, and especially I think fleeting exchanges where you haven't had a long opportunity to really get to know and investigate someone. And I really like relying on your intuition. How are the ways that we can approach those encounters consciously?
Yeah. I am very much in sync with Cuckoo and how his perspective and what he was sharing. And the thing that stands out for me is back to that whole thing of know yourself, baby. Because if you don't know, other people know you. Yeah, other people are stronger and aware. Like how hunting is a primal thing, and even like some of the youth in the streets, when they're saying they're going out to like hook up, they're like, we're going hunting. It is a hunt. They know, like you can somehow, who is aligned to you, who is vulnerable, how you can manipulate people who are self-aware. Not everyone who is self-aware is out here with good intentions. So it's in the best interest for an individual to take their time to know themselves before they're a prime stake for somebody else. Because a lot of the time, especially with gifted people or people whose energy is strong, and virgins, for example, like, do you remember, I think it was last year when there's a whole hullabaloo about what things were happening in Kenya as well as in South Africa of virgins disappearing, and what is the value of a virgin? Because, in cultural context, as well as Christianity, we're always like, the virgin's important. What is that? That purity, When you are innocent, may you not be naive, or may you know what it is you're carrying, even if you haven't interacted with it. I don't know if this makes sense, but I think the thing I'm trying to share is take time to trust and know how your energy moves so that you can follow your instincts. To what Gogo was saying of know in your heart before you seek out what's happening in your sacral chakra, trust that, open up to that, and allow for things to not work out if they don't work out. And the thing is, sometimes you will know, when it's a good connection, you'll be like this one. And you may, like, it might only be, you don't have time to know each other that long, or you choose not to, it's okay. When you flow in sync, it can be a beautiful thing, But yeah, with we also, and I speak also now from, how an energy, like a magnet, there's the one that is pulling to and the one that is, like, there's the giver and the receiver. And so the things that we receive during sex, like when someone jumps up and they're like, oh my God, I feel so amazing, but you are feeling like, oh, I don't know why I'm so tired, I'm so heavy. You have just been washed into, someone has cleansed themselves in your sacred waters. And if this is someone that you care for, you know what to do and how to like cleanse yourself in order to connect. But if you are not aware that you are being released upon, and you are not then taking the time to cleanse yourself before you go out into the world, it's like all the birds are pooping on your car in the street. Have you seen bird poop when it dries up? It hurts, the acid eats the paint. And you're not knowing. You're still like, no, it's okay, I'm living my best life. It's okay, you can live your best life. But be aware of what is being released into you and what you can do to remove that. So you continue to move as yourself. Not all energies are for removing. I think that's where that love connection comes into play. When you wire into each other and it serves you both, ride it, enjoy it, let it shift both of your realities. Because sex is literally power. That is why also when people are looking for, back to that, when people try to control their partner, when they want a partner who feels less self-aware or, naive, because they're just going to drink from them. This person is just going to be drank from. There's no energy that is moving back, And so what Coco was saying about learn to shield yourself or learn to have a spirit of discernment about how you're moving, whatever your moves are, and all, because that power of sexuality, I think, moves not just when you're having sex, also when you're practicing abstinence. That energy is still moving through you, So what do you do with it? How can you keep it flowing? Because if you lock power up in a space, it will explode. It will lead to a destructive quality. So sexual energy needs to keep moving, not just through the don't stop, get it, but through other things. If this is my time, and sometimes it can feel like, oh my gosh, I am deeply lonely. I am yearning for. Instead of trying to force yourself out of where you are, I find that the best thing to do is accept that, because there's divinity in that too. It is time for you to know yourself, to know your pleasure also, to pleasure yourself. So you can now see your partner and you're like, no, you're doing that wrong. Just move over here, to the left, to the right. You can know yourself and then from there rise again. I think it's a seasonal thing. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I've spoken a lot, but I hope it.
No, it's great.
This is what was coming up. as I was listening to what Cuckoo was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really great. Thanks, Koya. And I also like that you pointed out that when we talk about sex as power and sexual power, it's not just in the act of having sex. Sometimes it's in the act of not. Because I think we tend to think of sexuality in a very narrow way. And I recall in some of the conversations we've had in the past in the adventure space, there have been conversations around asexuality and people who say, well, actually, I don't want to engage in physical sex. That doesn't mean that I'm not a sexual being, and that power doesn't actually remain within me. So I really like that you kind of got into that wider spectrum of understanding sexual power. And I want to come back now to something that both of you mentioned, which is around the shielding, and the protection, and in some cases the cleansing, when there has been an exchange that leaves you feeling drained, that doesn't enhance your power, but feels like, I don't want to say takes away from power, because I think that's an inherent thing, but perhaps leaves you heavy with energy that you didn't want to ask for. So I'll come back to you, Cuckoo. Do you have some thoughts or guidance? And I know some of this is specific, to individuals and their context, and that's why people also come and have consultations and go through that deeper process. But broadly speaking, are there any kinds of principles that you have when it comes to energetic protection around sexual interactions and cleansing yourself of negative energy that might sometimes come with that?
Right. I feel before we even get into that, I just quickly wanted to, what Koi was talking about, a feeling. It's a feeling that you get. And I feel like it's very important that we stress on that before we even move on to ways of cleansing and protecting oneself and all of these things. I remember, in primary school, where we used to have these people that would come into our school and they would teach us about feelings. And it seemed very basic at that time because you're being taught what is a good feeling and what isn't, especially curbing sexual violence, sexual abuse towards children and all of that kind of stuff. And so what they taught us was a yes feeling, a no feeling. I think it was a campaign that was being run all across Africa during that time because children were being preyed on. And so the feeling, sometimes it's not about, you don't have to be psychic to know. Some of the things you won't feel, you won't see, sorry. So people usually give the perpetrator a look, like this person looks that way and therefore they're a perpetrator. But actually, you have to feel. So what we were saying in the beginning about that relationship with yourself, to know what is right for you, it's that yes or no feeling. Sometimes the person can be very attractive, but when the person touches you, you feel something is off about that particular person. And you don't need to have more detail. You don't need to follow up to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? You need to trust that feeling. So that is the one thing. Now let's move on to the cleansings. So the reason why before you even get to the cleansing, you have to start, a person must always do something beforehand. So you have to know that the person that I'm engaging gives me a specific thing. Now, if you're psychic or if you're a medium or any of those people who work in the field that I work in, we will know why we're getting that feeling. Yes, it's a no feeling, but it's accompanied by visions, for example. Now, if you get that no feeling, follow that feeling, because it kind of stops you from that. You won't need a cleansing to begin with, right? Some people want to be with a specific person, but they don't know why they're feeling as if the energy between the two of them is off, so you have to go with that feeling. So now, once it comes to cleansing, the few things that we look at when it comes to cleansing is what kind of spirit was passed on. So through sex, a lot of things come to life. It's not just children. And we're not just talking about heterosexual cishet people, we're talking about across all spectrum, right? So if sex can give birth to children, if through sex you can get STIs, if it's unprotected, trust that you can also take
There are other
something
things.
that has been resting
Mm,
in that person's spirit for a very long time,
mm,
carrying the trauma on your back
mm,
once you've left the bed of that particular person. So things
mm,
can be inherited, not inherited, but be passed on through sex that you do not see. I usually find that with disease or viruses or any of those things that we do not want to have, but sometimes we find ourselves having, they are a manifestation of the spirit. So the one thing that I
mm,
know for a fact is that once you have contracted an STI, obviously a cleansing must happen afterwards. Okay. Then the other thing that we look at is once you've been sexually abused or you've been raped, if you've gone through any kind of sexual violence, a cleansing must then also happen. And it's not necessarily a thing of washing off shame. I feel that when you go to the water, and a lot of people look at it as shame as if there's something dirty about you. It isn't actually about that. For me, it's more of to gain power. Okay. I associate the water with healing. And so when you go
mm,
to the water, and I don't actually like using the word cleanse because it assumes that you're dirty, but you're going to fetch healing. I keep on telling
mm,
people that you're going to fetch healing at the water, you're going to fetch your waters. The water
mm,
that gives life. It's the thing that grows and nurtures you. And because the water is responsible for doing all of those things in our daily lives, so can it give life where life was taken from you.
mm,
If you know the aim of that particular person was to bring shame onto you, was to bring a specific kind of darkness on you, you're going there to retrieve light from the water. You're
mm,
going to retrieve life from the water. And so it's partly both water, but also it is the using of herbs. Okay, so it's herbs that can beautify you, herbs that can remove what else might be resting inside you, and it's not just cleansing, washing of body, but through purging, through vomiting as well, through steaming as well. In Nigeria, they got this yoni steams. I think that's what they're
mm,
called for women. Men also have what we call palaza, which is to drink and vomit, thing
mm,
to drink a concoction of herbs and throwing up in the water. And as you're doing so, you're being washed by this wave, depending on whether you're at the ocean or at the river. And so part of doing that is to go and reclaim power. And part of doing that also isn't just to be washed, but to communicate with your spirit. And because I work from a context of African spirituality, we understand what spirits can do for people. We've always gone to spirits to seek counsel, to seek for rain, to seek for providence, and all of these things. And so when you go there, you're basically going to report. It's like you're running back to your mother to say, this was done on me. I need you. I need my mother. I need you to come and clean me, to cleanse me, to give me power.
mm.
And that's essentially what the
Beautiful.
clinic is about. And it's in three parts. Like I said, it's not necessarily just the physical washing of the body, but purging through drinking and vomiting
Mm,
concoctions, through steaming even while you're there at the water, so that your mind can open up. If there's any kind of trauma that you had hid in the somewhere, the corner of your mind, because it needs to be healed. And so you
mm,
will cry at the water. You will feel a sense of, I don't know how to describe it, but like it's a sense of love, I guess, a sense of grace. That's how my clients describe it. So I feel better. I feel like something was lifted off of me. And so it will
mm,
manifest in tears. I've seen men who said they would never cry. And they've cried as a result of the mother, the water, having embraced them
mm,
and saying that it will be okay. So that's partly why we're going to do that. And also, it's not just after sexual relations or sexual engaging someone sexually. I feel also there are ways to empower, to use, like, my method of healing is through herbs. So there are people who may come seeking specific herbs to boost their libido. You find that there are relationships that are really struggling where a person might not feel anything, where we say that the sex magic has gone, has dwindled. And so couples arrive seeking something to boost that libido, to boost romantic feelings even, or to inspire romantic feelings between two people so that they can, experience the fullest potential. And that is where the magic really comes in. And other times to just make the sex, to make it really great to a point, to reignite passion. A lot of people come seeking the thing of igniting passion between a couple that has lost the magic, the touch. And so it's not just cleansing, it's not always going to be cleansed or going to fetch your waters. Sometimes it's also to give to yourself, to give yourself the pleasure that you deserve, and to know that the person, whoever it is that you're engaging in, must also be equally responsible in growing their own pleasure, nurturing their own pleasure. And so that is partly what I do. I don't know if it quite answers what you were asking, but I feel, you've gotten both ends of there's cleansing, and then there's also something to boost or to ignite. And what most people tend to do, and I'll just also add that there, is about what some people tend to do is they use what is meant to boost your libido, to ignite passion between a couple. They use it to go and fetch, other people's things, So muti has never really been a bad thing. I just feel people have used it for bad intentions. So it has gotten bad rep. But in actual fact, its original intention was that if you drank from a certain concoction, if you had erectile dysfunction, if you felt that you needed the walls of the home to be a bit tighter. So this is the stuff that you go and fetch, and you them together with your partner. There has to be full consent because you consult together. You don't just go there and say, I'm going to get something for myself. Your partner must then knowing it needs to be a ritualistic form of coming together, even during sex. It must be a two-way street.
Eyes wide open, like for both. One shouldn't be hoodwinking their partner into, like, we rise together, we learn together. Can I add something on what Cuckoo was saying about education? Like how when you were mentioning how in school there were people who were like, this feels right, this doesn't, yes, no. And also what you're saying of how you educate people, your clients, about how to support yourself into a healthy relationship. And from, like, I come from the Gikuyu tribe in Kenya. And traditionally, before like Christianity came about, there were ways of teaching and preparing both all young people on what sex is, what intimacy is. And so you're born into an age group, which would be like you and say the people born in the 3 years around your time, and that age group is given a name, and you're sort of nurtured as the opposite gender. So the boys of that age group, the girls of that age group, yeah? And then when it comes time closer towards puberty, closer towards initiation, but before initiation is done, they would prepare them for intimacy. So there would be like a matron of the, like, say, an elder woman who talks to the girls and is like, listen, so from now on certain nights, you can have quality time with the boys. So you basically match up with your peers. It's like a one boarding school hooking up with the boarding school next door, but they are rules, and the Gikuyu girls' loincloth had to be taken and tucked in on the back in a certain way to secure her. It becomes almost like a diaper, like this should not come off. There should be no penetration during this time, but they are allowed to get to know each other intimately, see what it feels like to rub upon each other, and to enjoy each other's company. And the consequences for if you guys take this time and go all the way, there are consequences not just for the woman, which is often very common in today's society of the woman is loose. Do you think she impregnated herself? Come on, so, but for the boy also, if this did come about, there was of course, the penalty of cattle, etc. but the boy ran the risk of being excluded from his age group indefinitely. So basically, you've been kicked out of your fraternity for having broken the sacred rule of sex, you know? And so then this way now, after initiation, when they were ready to choose life partners, it was also, marriage was a love connection. It was up to you to choose. You could choose who you want, and then from there, the parents start discussing. But now you go in knowing a little bit more about yourself, about what it means to be with this person, not just, you know, in society, but intimacy through that sexual connection, you know? And I found that, initiation became strictly forbidden by the Christians. It was almost like if you want to come to missionary school, you cannot do that, etc. And so with that died the preparation for sex, you know? So even now you'll find sexual education is very fear-based. You know, it's about like, do you know what gonorrhea looks like? Have you seen syphilis? This is what it is, you know? And then sort of, which is good to know, but we're also not being prepared, or we're not being shown the beauty of it. This is what it means to stand in your power. This is what it means to have a lover who is quite close to you, you know? So education is, and I believe Paula and I mentioned this now, we were talking a while back, of how in East African communities, like in Uganda, you have a senga, who is your auntie, who when you're getting married, is there to tell you the moves, you know, and to be like, do like this to your man, do like that. But once again, this information is only given to you at the point of marriage. And so it's like, okay, well, it's good to have these boundaries, but let's be realistic. Let's look at the world as it stands. Is that the only time people are having sex? No. Okay, so can we talk about it instead of pretending that we are a certain type of way and then limiting access to self-awareness? Yeah.
Yeah, that question of how sex education has evolved, or not, the opposite, regressed over time, and how that's tied to many other influences around religion and so on, is really central. And I think that's why it's important to have spaces like this and similar spaces that people are starting to create, to have these conversations. Thanks for sharing that. It's always interesting to hear the perspectives from different countries and see where there's similarities and, you know, contrasts are. I do want to mention that we are seeing the questions. Budumela, we've seen your question. There was one before that as well, a comment, and we'll come back to them. We have about just over 30 minutes maximum left. So I wanted us to still touch on a couple more topics within the panel, and then we'll have at least 15 minutes more at the end, just to focus on questions. So as you were talking, Koi, and you're explaining the way that education was approached and the girls and the boys, I was thinking about how I think in our pre-colonial societies, there was also a lot of space for people who didn't fit within those binaries, right? And this is something which, like African spirituality, has been very much erased from our current histories and made to seem like it's something that came from outside. I mentioned earlier in the opening about the festival art. And some of the explanations that Michael shared in the opening discussion, which I really encourage everyone to go and listen to if they haven't, because he explained it so well. And it was also connected to research done by Cuckoo, who's the art director for Adventures Live. And it looks at the ways in which deities, African spirituality, the deities, specifically for Burkina Faso, I think it was, and Nigeria, how some of those, I try to get this name right, and I really apologize to the people of Benin if I get it wrong, Maolisa, who was the androgynous deity that encapsulated male, female, didn't, I mean, we say encapsulated, but maybe just didn't really engage with those binaries at all. But it was basically all these identities that existed together in one body. You know, he also spoke about the way in Burkina Faso how queer people were seen as gateways to the higher beings, to spirituality, and occupied a very revered space in society as a result of that, which couldn't be further from the reality we find ourselves in today, where it's made to feel like, in many societies, like the opposite of that, you know, like this is ungodly or, you know, unnatural to us as Africans, which history clearly shows is not the case, but that's not really a history that has been sufficiently spoken about. So to come back to you, Cuckoo, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that and on the way that, the space that queerness and this, non-gender obsession occupies in African spirituality, and what, from your context, I guess, and your practice, what that means for how we understand it today. So Cuckoo, that one is for you. I'm not sure if you can hear us. Yeah. Oh.
Right. So, in terms of, there was a system before anything came onto us, before religion, and before we were even taught the yes or no feeling. There were already things that were put in place. And some of those things were rules, some of those things were shunned upon by the church, specifically the church, and I will come for it because the reason why we're in this situation is because most of those part of our identity, not even a part, I feel almost as if like our identity, the way that the permission and the responsibility and the everything that we need to use to construct our identity was taken away from us. So also is the deities, those who dwell in what we say is the celestial organization of God. Those are the people who are responsible for forming. I feel to a large extent, even in assigning gender, if there was such a thing. So you'll find some people in other countries, they've got different names, but we also have the same one, which is usually Kwanyoka, which is a woman of the lake or the woman of the ocean, depending. She was always addressed as this woman who was the mother of the queer children, and queer children who are holding gifts within their hands, spiritual gifts. And so we always knew that we had a mother. That mother was kind of like taken away from, the idea of that mother was taken away from us. And so being queer and being gender nonconformist, being trans, being lesbian, gay, whatever, and especially beyond sexuality, because I always feel as if like being gay is a sexual thing. It's not necessarily a gender construct. It's not because like you can still be gay and be like completely a woman, in your mind, or a woman man, depending, So I feel the idea of gender is very influenced by the deities, and they're the ones that assign us to certain missions. We arrive here in bodies, which we now say they're human bodies, but in spirit we are other. I'd like to always kind of remind people, before the gender of a child was never really revealed at birth. Okay, it came later on. There were different rites of passage, either into manhood or into womanhood. If they saw that there was something queer about this child, the child wasn't taken to the healer, because the healers knew what to do with the child, you see, because the child was then special. The child was then queer, but held in a very high regard. And you'll find that in cultures all over the world, that the queer child was always looked at as the closest being to God, or the closest to the deities. So the deities communicate directly to the child, and then the child has to go and inform that particular village. So quite a special crop, not the way that we are looked at today. And you know what is so strange is that, not really strange, it's just really ridiculous at this point, is that Africans don't understand that they don't have, it's almost like this thing is new, it was brought to us. Even what is ours, or what belongs to us as African people, is being looked at as something that was brought to us. Like, how do white people come and tell you who you are? How do Western like how do a person gets on a ship comes to you that no, this is, you're now gay or you're now. White people don't do that, and they don't have the time. They're building things elsewhere in their, whatever they built through their ancestry. So now I feel it's a thing where Africans really need to start taking charge of what is really the problem. And I feel that the problem is the lack of identity.
Self-awareness. Yeah.
Once they start knowing what is,
Sorry.
Go on, Cuckoo.
Oh, yes. Are we addressing questions now, or should I just continue?
No, please continue. Please continue.
Okay. Yes. And so, where was I? It's how Black people need to start looking at at their identity a bit deeper, and to know that their identity is not separate from spirit. It is not God. So God has created you a certain way. To be told, how does a Bible come and tell you, no, this is, how does it tell you that this is what you feel like and think like? God doesn't make any mistakes, and in our African culture, the way that God is that this is the person who creates no mistake. This is someone who even has servants, archangels in other religions, but in our culture, in our African way, we know them as deities who are above and below in the water, in the sky, whatever it is. But these are people who then take possession over the child. So now they will say that the African child, queer child, is demonic because they do not specifically understand what the spirit has come to do. The same spirit that is necessary for bringing rain onto earth, the same one that is for bringing life onto earth, and the same one that can still end it all in one day. And the next thing you know, there's a flood, you see. And queer children are an extension of that, of those beings, of those deities, the servants of God, the closest to God, the ones that champion. And I mean, it's not even to say that it's only humanity. I feel like I'm getting off track. Not just this world and this human race, which exists. Yeah.
No, you're not going off track at all, Cuckoo. Thanks. That really, I think, answered the question and went into a lot of depth. I wish we had in this time to explore it more. Koi, you also had something that you wanted to add on that?
May I add to that? The question of what the relationship, spirit is power. And with power, humans tend to desire control, conformity, which is structure and enforcement of, it has to be like this. And I think the journey of the queer child, especially in the East African context, where when we look at a lot of our origin stories, etc., we have to dig quite deep to find the stories that break free of the gender norms, And I think, even in the healer space, the fear of the feminine is quite specific, and like the females are excluded, but they have to be there to be used. So as in, they know water is feminine, and to have water in your space, you must have a wife. So like a traditional healer in Kenya cannot practice without a wife, because the wife is the energy that he is then using, but they will not teach the wife. So now when a queer child comes into that space, because a queer child is like, who are you to tell me which lane? I am both these energies in one, yeah? So the fear that triggers, because individuals who are not fully self-aware or trusting in their energy are always feeling vulnerable about someone's coming to threaten me, someone's coming to take what's mine. The abundance of the divine suddenly goes away when you're scared of the limited or when you see it as scarce. So the queer child then becomes such a threatening presence, because it's like, what do you mean you're just coming in and taking everything and being it clearly? How dare you? There's rank and protocol. And that's what people then try to stifle at a young age. Instead of trying, when they see the signs, they now try to knock it out of the child, as opposed to being like, these are the signs that this child has more to say. Let me nurture and protect the child. So in terms of that question of, it's unfortunate and it's annoying that we're still looking at this, but it comes from a place of when people are so intimidated by their own strength, and we're still continuously looking for approval from other people of, is what I'm doing good enough? Do you like my dress when it doesn't look like yours? It's hard for us to now just settle in and be like, in our lane, we trust ourselves and we move like this. And how to now do that without it being an act of war on the other. Because we're not now saying, white people, you must now all come and be like us. Oh, you be you. But the same way you have the audacity to fully be yourself, I'm going to do the same. Yeah, there's enough space for us here. So now spirit comes back into that again by when we allow ourselves to feel the abundance of the divine. There's lanes for everybody, and we can see the sacredness of the queer child. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Corey. And I think it actually brings us nicely back to where we began about the importance of that self-awareness and really leaning into that and sitting in our power. You know, we started this conversation speaking about how that is central to our individual sexual interactions. And I think where we're landing is also how it's central to our communities and how when you lack that within yourself, that then also feeds into the hate and the control that you then try to exert on others around you. I'm thinking of the comment made, unfortunately, I can't remember her name, the panel last week, Monday, in this Adventures Live Festival, which if you guys don't know, is all available on the Adventures YouTube. Where this will also be posted, and some of you are probably watching this. So last Monday, there was a conversation around trans women and the experience of sex and sexuality, and there was something one of them said about how because of being in such a patriarchal society where men are seen as the better, the higher, part of the rage of her family when she said, well, actually, I'm a woman, was how can you take yourself from here to a place that we perceive as lower? And again, it's that thing of the fear, this, you know, the lack of just groundedness within oneself and the desire to exert control and being threatened that someone doesn't see and fall into line with that. I would like us to go on. There are some questions, so just to make sure that we have enough time to do those justice, let's get to them. Sandals, you said the amount of times I have betrayed that feeling. Hey, my friend, if I could have $1 for every time, I would own the whole internet. But yeah, and I think it's a journey, and it's something that we're always all constantly trying to get stronger at. There was a question from Puitumelo. So how can one do the cleansing themselves, or do we need the guidance of a healer? I think that is for you, Cuckoo. You had spoken about the cleansing. And then there was also a question about masturbation. In some spaces, it's seen as dirty. For your Dlozi, that's your ancestors. Your thoughts on that? So let's start with cleansing. Does that need the guidance of a healer? And then we can move on to masturbation.
I mean, it doesn't, like you don't need a healer to cleanse. There are very basic things that you can use. There are different types of cleansings, obviously, and I won't go through all of them, but there's some that you can do for yourself. Obviously, healers use different products or different herbs. It's not always going to be the same, but I would say that yes and no, because one, if a healer tells you that you do not need to go to the water, that this is purely something to cleanse for, let's say, to purify your beauty. If, for example, when you're walking through this world, nobody wants you, nobody wants to speak to you. When they look at you, they kind of look at you as if you're guilty of something, which also can be inherited. Let me just also add that the karma of either a past life karma, or it could be an ancestral karma, in the sense that maybe an ancestor had betrayed or done something, you know, to another family, and now you're through this world carrying that baggage, that thing. So if that you do not need a cleansing, or that this is, you just need a cleansing to bring out your inner beauty, to edify your beauty and kind of restore your ancestors' name, then you can do that one at home. But there are specific ones which require you to go to the river, and those ones you cannot do on your own. You must go to someone someone queer, to someone queer, so that they can introduce you to or to cleanse you, um, to cleanse you at the water, because you don't. When we are there at the water, it's not just water. We're talking to the guardian of the water, depending on where that water is. Could be the ocean, Atlantic, the Indian. There are guardians everywhere, and so part of what we're asking for when we go there, because it's not just again a water thing, is you have to commune, with that particular spirit and say that this is what I come here seeking. I come here seeking restoration and healing and water, and we need to use the water. Okay, because places, people look at the water and even this earth, like there were guardians before that. They will always be here. We will leave them here when we die. And so when we go there, part of it is to ask, out of respect, to ask whether we can use that water. And for a person to do that, the healer, the one who has been given permission work with water, can do that. So I've been given permission to work with water by my grandmother's, my maternal lineage, and for that reason, I can then take a person to the water. Yeah. So, but if they say no, you can do it by yourself, or they can mix something for you to use, and you can go and use it at home. It's purely it's optional, unless the healer says otherwise. And the masturbation one. No, it's not dirty. I feel like the question says, can I read it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so in some cases, masturbation is seen as dirty for your clothes, for your ancestor. It's not. Let me just tell you something. When you're having sex, your whole body is sex with you. Okay, so when you, a lot of people think, because they kind of bring that Christian mentality of Adam and Eve in the garden. Let me just already tell you now, there was no fruit, it's sex. The analogy, the example there is that they had sex when they were told not to have sex. And so the shame, the whole covering is finally being able to see yourself as, oh, I'm a woman or I'm a man. Because before that, they were not aware of genders even. I don't even think they knew what those things were. They just felt a thing and they explored that thing. And so now when people come into African spirituality, they feel that, oh no, we must have sex and then hide. There is nothing wrong with sex. There is no sex before, or no sex before marriage. We don't have those things here. What we have is, you need to be a consenting person, and you need to fulfill the urge, because sometimes it could be that your ancestors want you to through having children. And if you are queer and you aren't necessarily a person who intends on having children, whether queer or not really doesn't matter. But the point of it is, follow the feeling. It needs to be right, and you need to honor it. It needs to be, again, that yes feeling. And no, even if you are doing it with yourself, I actually find that masturbation is the best thing, as long as you do not carry it into a space where it becomes unhealthy, where you disassociate from everything else in the world, and even from your partner, to attend to that. But I feel you can explore with your body, because once you know what your body requires, then it's easier to then introduce yourself to someone and say, this is how I'd like you to treat me. Like I said, the most important relationship that you'll have is with yourself. So part of that also is learning what you like in the bed. And so that is where masturbation comes in. And yes, your ancestors can see you as you're masturbating. And no, they're not frowning, and they're not like, this is this thing. What they're saying is, follow the urge, feeling, because it will lead you to some point. You find the right person that you will meet, and then you will still explore that feeling, as long as it's right for you. Okay, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And it reminds me, Koi, of what we mentioned earlier about the idea of spirituality while having sex. Inviting spirit, inviting ancestors into your bedroom or couch or car or wherever, wherever the things are happening.
Wherever.
And maybe it's not necessarily about inviting them, as Cuckoo just said, when you're having sex, all your ancestors are having sex with you, but more being aware and conscious and leaning into that presence. And so a question that I have for you is, are there any ways in which, we spoke about, of course, being in tune with yourself, and that is something that happens consistently, even outside of sexual interactions, but within the act of sex itself, are there any specific practices or rituals that one can take to really, I guess, to lean into that presence and to harness it in a more conscious way? For example, I've read some things about sex, sex manifestation, sex magic. What are your thoughts on those kinds of practices?
I think for me, it starts once again from before the moment, So it's back to what you're saying of in inviting spirit in, but also having compassion for that dirty feeling. For the part of you that feels shame, instead of being like, this is not a shameful place, shut up, section of me that is feeling guilty. Being like, babe, what is it that you're feeling guilty about? Why are you scared? Like fully just acknowledging it, because when we gag something, it will now blow up in the cupboard, So hold space for it and be like, I see you. We're no longer in that moment. We're no longer in that place. My body is what it is today. I am feeling myself how I am, and I allow myself to grow. And then so now the wounded parts of you also rise up and support you in your expansion, in your rewiring, But tips for in the moment, follow the joy. When you feel nervous, focus on your breath. Like the same way like in meditation, like when you fall in sync, and you fall in sync with your partner, then you like then you're not, instead of both of you bouncing around, you start to bounce in rhythm, So as in like as you ground yourself and you stay present, you then sort of find the heartbeat of the moment and lean into that and allow it to rise. And sort of like give thanks for it. That attitude of gratitude, it's welcome there in that moment too. At least that's what I've found. I don't know. I don't practice any like conscious. That to me is sex magic. Yeah, that is like allowing being present with the movement of spirit. And because it's a powerful charge. By just acknowledging it, it's somehow, how do you feel about that, Cuckoo? Is there something else that you feel we can acknowledge while in the moment? Sorry, I'm getting choosy now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel sex ritual, I mean, they've been there for ages. And the people who held this magic, this wisdom, were the women, and they shamed women for it many years ago when Christianity arrived. It was the power of seduction, and they had to embody that, and they were taught how to do that through initiation rites of passage, where they would then come, because what they were being raised with at the time, the mind of a man, using sensuality, gentle things. It's not even like, you're not gonna light a whole carcass of a cow up in flames and so that the man can know, but like literally place on the body which to touch, which I find myself know also for some reason. I feel like I just suddenly know these things. And I feel like I'm an embodiment of those things of my great grandmothers, because I find myself doing them, like a gentle touch, using specific perfume. It's a mind game to get them to do what you want them to do. It is what is known, I feel, in Western, not Western ways, but in the Christian context, as witchcraft. Do I practice witchcraft? I don't know. But what I will tell you is that insofar as rituals, they are done for a specific and part of that is either to conceive, for people with conception, very we harness energy from the moon and the planets and how they shift around. But also, it's not just to conceive children. I mean, a lot of people say, why do you need a ritual to conceive children? No, it's for specifically people who struggle with conception. But then the other thing also is to consummate a marriage. You don't always have to, but like before, even the what the church brought up marriage certificates that you have to, like before the government became a part of a marriage. Um, Consummating of actual experience was seen as marriage in a way, but also to create money, not necessarily money, but material wealth. Money is too limited a concept, but to generate material wealth through sex because of two people who might be consenting or who are consenting to doing that ritual. All I'm going to say is that, and maybe not all I'm going to say, but what I will say is that if sex can bring about a child into this lifetime, it can bring many other things. Okay. And so part of those rituals, which I know, and I mean, I know how to carry them out. Part of those rituals are really to bring about life through whichever form, be it through in a form of material wealth. Um, yeah, you know, there are ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it, but it has to always be a consenting adult, especially people who are practitioners, kind of get together for that. You know, to harness that thing that vibrates. I'm more of a feeling person. I don't know how to really put it into words, but I know it's a feeling that comes that you have to harness. It's an energy that you harness. And once you've harnessed that energy, it needs to work for you. It needs to produce life. And whether it is the following day you feel the need to create artwork or wonderful music or to start building and providing and doing all of those things, that is what you unlock. You're just unlocking a part of you that has been shut for quite some time. And so there was a point in my life, my partner and I, my ex-partner at that point, we used to call it unlocking. So we never say would never say we're going to have sex. We say we're going to unlock each other. You see.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean there are rituals that can around sex, but more than anything, they're very simple things that you can do without having to light candles, without you ritualizing the act itself. Just gentle things, you know, to honor that spirit that starts vibrating. We know where it comes from. Healers know where that spirit comes from. It rises from your nether regions and it blows all the way up to here and then it explodes. You have to use that thing to create what you want to create.
And
And that's
that's
the magic. Man, I wish we could go on forever, but we have to wrap up in a few minutes.
That's
So I'm gonna ask
and a lot of
you
Christians
guys. I don't.
won't be very happy with this, but
Oh, that's it.
huh?
yeah.
Sorry, I think there was a delay. I didn't mean to speak over you, but I was just saying we're gonna have to wrap up in a few minutes. So I will ask you guys, please, if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers, and thank you all as well for tuning in. Koi, let's go back to you. Any final comments you'd like to make?
I think for me, even I've loved this conversation. I love both of you dearly and the flow of how we continuously learn, you know. And I think being self-aware is a never-ending journey. You don't come back from like a long retreat and you're like, I know who I am. Case closed. Let's carry on with the facts. It's always unraveling. And so with that, I think comes the different phases of our sexuality. You know, when we're abstaining, when we're back in it again, but all the way through that sexual energy does need to keep moving, you know, because if you don't let it explode up there, it now starts to sit in you and it gets distracted. It triggers depression. It triggers, you know, it stagnates, you know, it becomes like an unhealthy swamp. Water needs to move, you know. So wherever we are in that phase, May we always remember that sex is a beautiful way to connect to the raw absolute, that I am energy that moves through all things, because it is the energy of creation, you know? And may we always do what we need to stay aligned to the divine in whatever way we call the I am, you know? And then from there, once we know ourselves and we love ourselves, we can now move clearly. And may we have yummy sexual experiences as we do that, because we know ourselves well enough to express ourselves and feel safe, you know, because a lot of the time, a lot of the trauma around sex is being violated. Someone has entered in and hurt you. And putting up those barriers, it's not a matter of, come on, take those barriers down. It takes time. So honor where you are in the stages you are. If you have compassion for the shadow elements that come up with sexuality, because as we face them, then we can genuinely let them go. And then when we see another partner that looks like that toxic ex coming through, we're like, I know this. I've seen it. I don't want it anymore. That's not what love feels like anymore. Because when we're really in that bond, love feels toxic. We believe that, you know, if you're not screaming at me and throwing things, do you really care? You know, like, because we're conditioned that way. So may we heal and shift so we can then feel brand new again as we have stronger connections. So yeah, thank you for this. This has been a very beautiful hour and a bit. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Koi. Cuckoo, any final words from you?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, there really isn't much to say. I feel like Koi kind of like wrapped it up very neatly. But also what I also wanted to say was that all of these things are very much a part of the human anatomy. It's very much a part of also how our spirits function. If we weren't meant to be created in these ways, we would not be created in these ways. And so there's nothing to really be ashamed about in terms of, you know, expressing who you are. But also first know who you are. Once you first build that foundation of yourself, so then it becomes easier for you to express yourself in other ways. Sex is a language. It's a ritual. It is something that you give to yourself, and it's something that you give as a gift to the next person. And so once you understand that, and that your body is meant to do, and it's meant to express itself in that kind of way, then you also understand that there's no shame. It's given to us. Okay, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's given to us, and so there is nothing to be ashamed about when it comes to how your body processes things or expresses the idea of sex, as long as you know that it's not working from this of shame. You know, that's all I really wanted to. And also, the other thing is that, yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Cuckoo. Koi, thank you so much, both of you, for your time, for your energy, and all the wisdom you shared. I certainly have learned a lot from this, and I trust that everyone who's watching from different places has too. I want to say a special word as well as we close for our queer community around the continent. As mentioned, this would actually have been a conversation we could have in person. And, you know, after this panel, we could have met at the bar and had a drink and chatted more one-on-one as needed. And we are not able to do that because of this oppression that exists, not just in Ghana, but in many countries around the continent. So I think it was really beautiful and timely that we had this reminder of the inherent divinity of queerness. And I hope that that affirmation is something that everyone can carry with them away from this conversation. Thanks, Adventures Live, for organizing this, Fatima, Kosia, the whole crew. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event, which will be next week, Monday, another exciting panel, and throughout the month of November, actually. So please follow the Adventures socials for more details. Thank you, everyone. Lots of love, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Cool. Ciao.